Today we're creating art to put on a journal. It's stunning, it's new, and it's definitely lots of fun. Just look at this beading that I've added to some of them. I have a new technique and I'm really excited to share it. Of course I'm going to make it easy. As always, we have a plan. You can find these process steps to this tutorial along with over 60 others for free on Pinterest. I hope you can tell how excited I am to share this project with you today. I had a burst of inspiration when I was taking a class with Craftsy, who I'm delighted to say is the sponsor of today's video. Craftsy is your online resource for all things creative. So as well as papercraft and art classes, you can take classes on topics such as sewing, which I know many of us would enjoy, on embroidery, on knitting, on crochet, and even on jewellery making, which I'm particularly interested in at the moment. It's made me think about how we might take some of the skills and disciplines that we pick up from one area into another. So maybe into how we design the cover of a journal, or maybe how we build it into some of our ephemera projects that we put inside. I took a class called Make It Artsy, It's Only Natural with Julie Van Bolzer, and I watched a piece of clay be moulded to make a piece of jewellery, and then that jewellery was covered with paint with acrylic in layers to make it look really beautiful, be transformed into something that looks so pretty and aged. And it made me think about how we could use paint in layers on our junk journal, and that's what my tutorial really is about today. Craftsy is always creating new classes, and you can even connect with fellow makers and ask questions and share ideas. So the first 1,000 of you to click on the link in the video description box down below will get a full year of premium membership to Craftsy for only $1.49. This is valid for new members only, so check it out and let's make some art for our own journal. So these are the little art journals that we're going to make today. I think they are absolutely stunning, and for me they are definitely something a bit different. The base is made from a used envelope, so a bit of junk, and hopefully we all have one of those. And the artwork is just on a small piece of light cardstock, and I'm going to take you through step by step everything you need to do to make your own art to put on your journals. But I want to specifically cover not only how to build up these little pieces of paint mat with the doodles and the extra blobs on top, but these stunning elements here that I've added. And this is what I think is new, and I've got a new little tool to share today that will help you do that really easily. And by the way, it's very cheap. So I've got a brown one with green beads here. I've done it with some orange to reflect the reds on this one, and just a different pattern. And quite frankly, you can do anything you like. On this one, I've added silver beads and some white sequins behind. The white goes with the white blobs of paint, and I felt the sequin went with the blue. I'll tell you how to add colour like this on the border around the artwork. And for these little journals, I've added coordinating scrapbook paper on the back, but a lot of it is using book page. So on the inside here, and here, and I will very quickly cover off how to add a signature with a twisted spine, which I think is quite important for this project because it makes it really strong and helps you have that professional standard of product. Maybe it's something you want to put in your Etsy shop or sell at a craft fair. So let's get going making our artwork. The piece of paper is relatively thick, and it's paper I've taken from a large pad. It's an Arteza spiral bound pad of mixed media paper, and the weight of this one is £110, which is 180 GSM. And the size of mine is 11 centimetres wide and 15.2 centimetres high, and that's 4¼ inches wide, 6 inches tall. The size of your piece of paper that you're going to use should be something that fits neatly on your journal cover when it's folded over. And I like to have a border. Let's show you with one of the examples. I like to have a border here so that you can see some colour behind, and it looks like this piece of artwork is then matted onto, well, to be frank, a relatively expensive piece of cardstock behind, when actually it isn't. That's just a book page. So take your envelope, fold it in half, and fold it in half with a window, if it has one, on the inside. And the reason I say that is, if you by any chance cover this up and can still see a little bit of the window behind, you can always put a pocket over where the window is visible. Sometimes with scrapbook paper you can still see through it and you'd see the window behind if it was on the outside. So I have cut mine to size, and you probably want to cut several of these because you're going to want to make a lot. And this, with these dimensions, is just about 1/2 centimetre short on either side of the size of the folded envelope. So plenty of space to see a border, but not too much so that it dominates what we're creating as artwork. So I'll set my envelope aside and just pull in some paints and put some of these tiles on the paper. Now you can use any colours you like. I've tried to stick to maybe a couple of colours on each of these, and I did quite a bit of experimenting when I was making these. Pulling together, this is sort of purple and red. I've got blue and yellow. I've got the red and sort of it's like an olivey green. And I've got a green and a brown. I think I prefer this one. So I'm going to take a brush and some water and simply create a few of these rectangles or squares on my paper. So I've got my brush. This is it's a Zen Art brush. It's actually quite stiff, the bristle, and the paints I'm using are Kuretake, and you can see the well-worn green, which is probably what I'll dip into today. I want a relatively wet brush, dive in. If you stick to just roughly a couple of shades, a couple of colours, I think the artwork looks a bit better, a bit more coordinated, but absolutely do whatever you want. And we cannot say that this is difficult. Choose colours that make you happy. I want plenty of pigment. These paints are pretty good, actually. I want lots of water because I'm going to add a few more layers of colour to each of these little colour. Let's call them mats of colour. I'm going to use some gold after. Now you don't need to have gold paints to do this. I think this project will work even if you don't have anything special. Maybe go in for something down here, a slightly smaller shape. It's time to get your paints out and have a play. Do something a little bit different, maybe something you haven't done for some time. Should we go in for some brown? I'm going to create the shape, not aligned with each other. Let's have it a little bit offset. There's a bit of randomness about this. I like that colour. I'll have another one horizontal over here. I just tend to vary the ones that are horizontal and ones a bit more upright, and then maybe have a square one. There we go. Nice rich colours. And I've got these gold paints, which are again really well used. Like I say, you don't have to have gold paints. I think all of these are from Stationery Pal. Whoa, look at that. I have actually wet these just before I started, and I think that really helps. I put my brush on the side, and no particular order to this. I just drag the paint a little bit and let it flow. I don't colour in the whole of the tile, but I just let it seep around. I'm sure there's a technical word for that if someone wants to let me know. Pick up any of these and I just add a layer of interest. Let your tile dry, and then we're going to add some dots of paint like we have on here in black and white. So when your art tiles have dried, they will look something like this. These are a couple I've made earlier. We've got a beautiful one with the yellow ochre and gold on top, and the gold has run around on some of these, which is really pretty. And this one has got slightly more lime green, which I really like, and a bluer green. We're going to add the black dots, like this one. I've got a brown and red one. And the dots go anywhere, but I've chosen to do it in black and white. And the paints that I'm using are a black acrylic paint. It's called Fancy Black, it's Arteza, and a tube of pearl white acrylic paint. The reason I chose acrylic paint is when you add the dots, you get a little bit of a raised effect, which gives you some texture, which is really, really interesting. And the fun and easy part of this is using cotton buds to apply the paint. You might want 5 or 6, and ideally you want cotton buds which are not really loose and hairy at the ends, because we want more of a distinct circle when we add the dab of colour. So I'm going to take a cotton bud and dab some paint in, and then I'm just going to create a little run of dots. Keep dabbing back in and replenishing, and I cut across 2 or 3 of these little coloured paint mats that we created, and I sometimes make the little dabs a bit bendy, a bit arced, just so you've got some movement. But I don't want too much, because we're going to add quite a few interesting things to this tile as a whole, and that means we want some spare space. I'm not really thinking, don't overthink this, don't think that there's any particularly clever way of approaching it. Maybe something like that. I'll go in with the white and I'll add some of that as well. So maybe I'll make this one curl round, keeping plenty of paint on the cotton bud so you get that raised effect. I don't want it to look too skinny on the paper. And maybe a little bit of something down here. We want to set this aside to dry, and then we're going to add some really simple doodles. So when your little art tile has dried, it will look something like this. This is one I prepared before, and I'm going to add some doodles, which are again incredibly easy. I'm using a black pen. It's a fine liner Arteza Inconic pen in black, and I've also got a white pen. You don't have to have a white pen, use what you've got. A fine tip is quite good. And we're just going to start by adding some little circles anywhere you like on your paint tiles, on your paint mats, like this one that I've done here, and I think on this one I actually used a blue pen to marry up with the blue here. So I'm going to add a few of these anywhere I like, specifically on both the white of the paper and on the paint tiles themselves that we've created. Anywhere at all. But again, don't completely fill your little tile, because we want space for more. But it's the variety, I think, for the eye that makes this really interesting. And you can't say that drawing a little circle is particularly difficult. That looks okay. Now I've got this white pen. I think this was Stationery Pal. It's a Uniball. I did try a few, and this seemed to be the best one of the lot. And by that I mean it gives maybe a slightly thicker white line. And I'm just going to add more noughts. Obviously you can't see much when you go onto the white paper, but if I add a few little clusters of noughts with this pen on the paint, you can definitely see that. I'm going to add a few crosses. It's starting to look a bit busy, and I don't want too much clutter. With the brown, I think it's nice to go on the white, so cover up some of the blank spaces. And then I'm going to go back in with my black and just do a few dashed lines. So maybe a few horizontal ones. They don't all need to be vertical. A little bit here, a bit up here. I think that's probably enough. I want to give the little paint mats a boundary. So with each of these, I've been using a mixture of a continuous line and a dash. And I'm going to do that. But what I do when I reach any of the little circles and blobs that I've already added to the paint, I go around them. So I leave a gap, and that's why I would want to do this boundary making last of all. So I'm going around to accommodate the circles or anything else, the crosses that we've already added. And hopefully you've been able to make one and you're really enjoying the process so far. So it's time to add some of that beading. So this is one of the examples I showed you earlier. I've got a larger brown bead here and a little cluster of green beads, and each of those is surrounded by, this cluster of 5 surrounded by 2 gold crimp beads, and I've just sewn it with embroidery thread, nothing particularly special. So I wanted to show you how to do something like this, although of course use any of your beads and make any decorations you like. So I'm going to use a new toy, and the toy that I wanted to share today comes in the form of what looks like a test tube. Do you remember these from school? So inside this there are what are called bead needles. I think you get 10, and I bought these on Amazon for about £3, so not particularly expensive. They're very strange, really, when you look at them. So delicate, you wouldn't think that each of these is actually basically 2 pieces of metal fused at either end somehow. I don't know how they make them, but what you do is you separate them. I hope you can see. You separate them. They look a bit like a bow, and you put your thread between here, and then what you've got is an incredibly thin needle that you can use to put through really narrow beads or paper. So I wanted to have a go at putting some beads on here and show you how I did that beading, and really get you inspired to use your beads and maybe get some of these bead needles and have a play. I've threaded one up already in a colour that reflects the paint that I've got on here, and I'm going to take a bead from this collection. This has come from some jewellery that I pulled to bits not long ago. I'm on a bit of a journey with jewellery and I'm absolutely addicted. I definitely want to do more with it. So I'll take one of these brown ones out, whoops, and I've got some little green ones down here. Take about 5 of those. Like I say, any form of decoration using your beads will work. I just want to show you the technique. I'll take my little crimper beads out. I'm going to put this on the paper just with a little bit of glue. So I've got a Pritt stick. I'm going to put that there, not quite in the middle. Don't want it quite in the middle. This is just to hold it while I do the sewing. Take your needle and just make a hole in the middle, and then make 4 more holes, north, south, east and west of that bead. Now I've chosen a bead, it's quite deep relatively, so there's definitely some 3D-ness about this piece of artwork when we've finished, but it's also one that will lie relatively flat. And I'm taking my bead needle, I need a knot in the end, maybe 2, so a double knot on the end of this. I'm going to feed this through from the back, hold the bead in place. You can see now why that stick of glue is quite useful to have a little dab on the paper. And I'm not using this needle to actually puncture the paper. I'm just using it to thread through the hole and go through the hole in the bead. And when I get to the position where I've reached my knot, I don't want to pull too hard. What I'm going to do is just take my needle and use those holes that we've already punched and basically sew down and then go back through the original hole. We're going to use that several times. Bring it through. You can see what's happening. We're starting to attach this bead with the thread. It wouldn't stay on with just the glue, and it wouldn't look as nice anyway. I'm going through south, go back through the hole again, pull it through. If you do feel you need to pull hard when you're pulling this needle through, don't just hold the needle. So get hold of your thread and pull that, because this is a very delicate needle. I'm going to go through the west hole, back through the middle. Right, pull on the thread as much as you can rather than the needle, and then back through the east. So we've done north, south, west and east. I'm going to turn it over at this point and take my bigger needle and use that just to puncture a hole for this one to come through. So I'll bring that back through. Now I'm going to take one of my little crimper beads. I've got really gaudy gold, I've got a brassy colour, I've got some silver and grey. So I'll just look at the picture and see what works for this. I actually quite like them looking rather bright. And literally just pick one up with my needle. I hope you can see it, let me know if you can. It's just a little bit of colour there. I'm going to take a small pair of pliers. Again, I think these featured in my jewellery making video, so do take a look at that. I will leave it linked in the video description box down below. It was a journey I was on and I acquired some jewellery, well basically broken jewellery, and I've harvested a huge amount from the collection that I gathered. I'm going to take some of these smaller beads, one, go for 5, 2, and the joy is that they will go on the embroidery thread, and you couldn't really do this with a regular needle. So I'll get that all the way down there. I've got 5. I think that's really nice. You could go to town. Imagine what you could do with this method, adding beads to your journal covers or to other ephemera. I want one more crimper bead. That can go at the end. And I'll give that a bit of a squish. It just holds the other beads in place, so they're intentionally lightweight metal. And then I'm going to take my bigger needle and underneath where that crimper bead is, make a hole and then feed my bead needle through. So I'm not using the bead needle to make a hole in the paper that we've painted on. And now all I want to do is head back up to this collection of threads here where we've already sewn and just use that to secure what I've already sewn. Tying a knot just to help that hold. And to make this really safe, what I'm going to do is add a little bit of tape, just clear sellotape on the back there like that. And that gives us a piece of artwork to put on the front of a journal. So I'll show you how to pull the cover together, attach this and have a fantastic, original, stunning and beautiful journal with art on the cover. The journal cover itself is very quick and easy. We're just going to take a used large envelope, and if you have any tatty bits, just tidy them up on the side by gluing them down. Just glue them in. Fold it with the window on the inside and decorate it. And the decoration that I'm going to use today is really simple. I've got a book page that I've coloured with some crayons, and I've done those in the colours of the artwork that we're going to add, so something sort of tones together there. I've got a couple of book pages. That's a German dictionary. One of the pages is a matte colour, and that will help when we come to use this on the front to create the border. And I've got a piece of paper that again has got some green in it just to coordinate and bring it all together. I'm going to start with the coloured page and just get that on the left hand side, and I'm going to line the interior of this envelope with pages that at least one overlaps in the middle. So I know that this one is a bit short of the middle of the envelope, but that's okay. So that goes on, and any spare I'll just tear off. So I'll use my German dictionary page to go on the right hand side here, and like I say, that is just going to overlap the centre fold quite nicely, and that will help the cover be much more robust. In fact, when it's finished, I think this is a really sturdy little journal, and I think that's why it would work incredibly well as either a gift or as something to sell at a craft fair. They'd be really stunning, wouldn't they? They'd show up really well on your table, and I think they'd come across very well in an Etsy shop photo as well. Tear off and fold as we go. Keep the fold really crisp, don't lose your fold. And then on the back I'm going to start with the coloured piece of paper, so that can go on the left here. Been hoarding it, but I have to use my stuff. Then I'm going to take my matte piece of paper and put that on here, and I know that that's going to go beyond the fold, further to the left, with about an extra centimetre or a centimetre and a half. That's about the size of book page that I've chosen, so that I've got plenty to go beyond the middle, and that will help to hold it down. But we're also going to do a bit of sewing, and it gives us enough space to sew on this piece of paper to the left of the spine, and again that adds strength. A bit too much there. There we go. And of course a fold to keep that nice and crisp. How fast was that? Now we just need to add a boundary to the front of our journal cover, and I like to do that because it really does make the artwork pop. And if you have any crayons or paint, then you can just play mixing and blending, layering different colours, so that it really does complement the colours that you've got in your paint tiles. So I've done it in all sorts of colours here, and the materials that I pulled out, because I've got them, are these little paint sticks. I think they're called Little Brian paint sticks. So I'll dunk my paint stick in, and actually quite gently, because there's an awful lot of pigment in these, just run the stick around the border. I need some green, just a little bit. Now don't put too much water on these because you'll dampen the paper too much. It will get going. There we go. And the one I really like to add is the gold. It's clearly the shortest stick now because I've used it the most, but it's that layering of paint, and also a little bit of shimmer. I can't resist it. And that's all we need to do for the border. What we can do now is attach the artwork onto the front, and I'm going to do that with glue and then sew. So the sewing that I recommend is, first of all, to run a line to the left of the spine, just one line down there, and it picks up this book page that overlapped the centre and really holds that down. Hence the reason I'm suggesting, if you're not using sewing, then add plenty of glue to this piece. And also I think it needs a border of sewing. I think that really adds a bit of beauty and finish and polish to this project. So I have run a running stitch starting at the bottom left down there. I've gone up, across, down and across, and just a little bit of a back and forth just to seal it down. If you don't want to sew on the cover, then I would suggest that you add faux stitching around this, and that would be just as good, at least aesthetically, but I would recommend that you sew it if you can, because it adds robustness. I wanted to give you an option for the interior of these little journals, and by that I mean whether you want to have, let's pick one, the sewing visible on the inside here, like this one, and I think probably like this one, which I actually quite like, and given that it's an art journal and it gives it texture, there's just something about that. But if you don't want to see this sewing, and I think on one of them I did it differently, you can obviously always add the internal papers after you've glued and then sewn your cover. Nothing different other than the order of events. When I made my little pocket journal, my perfect pocket journal, the other week, I did let the sewing show through, and I think it really worked for that one as well, but it's absolutely up to you. It's just about personal preference, so decide what you like and go for it. I think anything goes. The last step in this process is to bind in a signature, so I thought I would quickly show you the sorts of pages that I'm using, and you can of course use anything. I also want to give you some thoughts on the method of binding and what I think is preferable, what works best for this little project. And finally, I thought I'd show you some options for a closure and just very quickly talk you through the pros and cons of these as they relate to this project. So the pages I've got are, in this case, because it's a blue themed little art journal, I've got the blue on the inside cover here and a little blue on the first page, just to try and make that coordinate, because I think details matter. I've got more blank pages in this and fewer book pages than I typically have. In fact, I've pulled papers out of an art pad so that we've actually got proper art paper in here, but I've still mixed in things like music paper. That's a nice thick piece of paper for drawing on. A bit of colour, couldn't resist a book page with nice font, and that's quite thick paper as well. I went for that. Page to maybe make some notes, and this is just beautiful vintage writing paper. And I've sewn it in with a classic figure of 8 pamphlet stitch, just using string. I start on the outside, I come in, I go out, I do my figure of 8. And then what I'm doing on this project, and in fact I've done it now on several because I'm finding it really elevates the quality of the finish of the little journals, is a twisted spine. If you want to see a really easy to follow step-by-step guide on just the twisted spine, I will link a video in the description box down below, and you can check out the portion of the video where I do this. But basically, using a needle, going through the 2 little elements of the spine, looping the string, tying a knot at the bottom so that the tension and the strength that you've created is spread out along it, and coming back up and tying off. It's actually really simple, and it only takes a minute or 2 extra for the whole of the project to add something that's, I think, substantially different. And to be honest, I'll probably be using this on most of my projects when I just have a figure of 8 pamphlet stitch, because you get the strength and it just feels like quality. So if you want to sell these at a craft fair or a new Etsy shop, that's what I would recommend. In terms of a closure, I did think through what we could add to hold it all together, and I wanted to share very quickly a couple of thoughts on that. When I made a journal with lots of pockets in a few weeks ago, I did suggest a few choices, and I liked using ribbon. Now, my thought on ribbon for this one, first of all, I think it does distract from the artwork, which is the key feature of what we've got as a project here. However, I did think if you've got artwork in here, wouldn't it be good if you could actually hold it together? I looked at the choices where I had, for example, in these 2, ribbon going behind the sewing here or just glued on, so that you have a choice of it coming round and you being able to tie a bow at the side. I think that would get in the way of this. You'd have the clutter of the ribbon on the right hand side, but it is an option and you could do that and it would hold your artwork, your art journal together. But obviously what you'd have for the majority of the time when it's bound together is the ribbon coming over the top of your artwork. And if you have got any of these elements, like the extra beads, it's going to rub on that. So I decided not to have something like this with the ribbon going around the journal. So I chose to look at another option that I used before, and this is just having eyelets, so 2 eyelets, front and back, with a ribbon. And that would be possible, certainly possible, without even destroying any of the artwork on some of these, because you've got space to put your eyelets in. Again, I think the ribbon would be a bit of a distraction and you'd probably want to find coordinating colour of ribbon, but you could do it. So that is something that I would think about on some of these. But I looked at these and I just thought that the artwork wants to speak for itself, and that's what I want to show. So I'm sticking with no closure on today's project, but the point of this is to do exactly what you want and to do what you love. And if you have enjoyed this week's project, I would really love it if you would subscribe if you haven't already and leave me a comment and a thumbs up. Come and visit me because I will be doing lots more tutorials and creating lots of lovely projects. I hope to see you soon.